Hello and good whatever time of day it is for everyone around the world, and thank you for joining us. My name is Benji Shea, pronouns he, him, and I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Washington Information School, and also the session chair for today. Just a bit more about me, I'm advised by Dr. Amy Coe, who's also chairing a handbook Q&A later today, and also a research intern with code.org. And my research is in how to design interactions that translate data into equitable action within computing education. And it is my pleasure and privilege today to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Sue Sentance. Dr. Sentence's work is in teacher professional development in computing, physical computing in schools, and developing pedagogical content knowledge in computing. And she does that across her roles as the Chief Learning Officer at the Raspberry Pi Foundation, the chair of the Teaching and Learning Committee of the National Center in Computing Education, and as a senior lecturer at King's College London. Dr. Sentence has previously been involved in projects with including BBC Microbit, earned her PhD from the University of Edinburgh, and has recently been awarded the Suffrage Science Award for Mathematics and Computing. So here to speak about teacher professional development and CSEd research, Dr. Sue Sentence.
Excellent. Thank you. You've done lots of homework. That's amazing. So it's really great to be here. I hope you can see my slide, big, wide slide with pink writing on it. Somebody nod. Yeah, great. So, and I'm really delighted to be here, and it's great to have a virtual event. So I can be here at 6 o'clock it is in England time. So yeah, I'm coming to you from England. I live near Cambridge. And I've changed the title a little bit just because so it's a little bit clearer. I'm going to be talking about teacher professional development and CSEd research. And the overview of my talk, let me click on properly. I'm going to structure I'm going to go through today is I want to talk for about 30 minutes. Then I want you to go into some breakout groups, have a little chat with each other about some questions I'm going to give you, and then come back for some Q&A. We'll try and get that all in the time we've got allowed. So you can see what my overview is. I want to start by checking why you might be interested in teacher professional development. So I started off as doing my PhD, but in the middle of my career, I was a teacher. But I'm interested to know what your interest is in teacher professional development. So when I prepared this, I thought possibly that you might fall into one of these 4 categories. If you're a doctoral student's conference, you might be researching the nature of computer science professional development for teachers yourself. You might be working in another kind of area in school and need to work with others. You might be doing nothing to do with teacher professional development, but you want to, but you're also involved with offering PD as another part of your role or something else. So could you everybody put 1, 2, 3 or 4 into the chat? And that gives me an overview of who, that's a 2 from Jean. Hi, Jean. So it's interesting to see that you're coming things from different perspectives, or none of these. And if you're all 4s, then maybe I'll have to rewrite my talk quickly. But so I think that's great. I can see all those numbers coming in. So it's lovely to see that that you actually to think about why you've got an interest in this topic, and to see that other people have different perspectives. So I thought I'd just talk about with my teacher hat on for a little while. So I became a teacher, not straight from, not straight from university. So in my early 30s, I'd done a PhD in, I'd done my master's and PhD in AI when I was quite young, and then possibly due to having 3 children in quick succession, I decided that I would leave academia and I'd qualify as a teacher. And so I'm going to talk you through my professional development that I looked at when I was a teacher. So first of all, I was a new teacher, I qualified. And when I first was teaching, I was learning more from the teachers in my school, the teachers in my department who I saw as more experienced than me, and I learned from them greatly when I was a new teacher. As I got more experienced, I decided to do some examining. I started to meet teachers outside my own context, and I built up my network of other teachers that I knew who were interested in computing. And then I left for another school, and I started to look at other courses, and I started getting interested in pedagogy and active learning and doing courses around there. And then I started to support other teachers. I started to train other teachers, write curriculum materials, and then I went off to another job where I was a head, and I decided my whole department should start using Python. So I sent them all on courses and worked through that. And then I joined Computing at School when it started. We've got to about 2009 now. And then I went on and got very excited about computing education, basically did some more courses, did a master's, became a teacher educator, a lecturer, and that takes me up to about 2011. And the rest is the stuff that Benji was talking about. But when I was thinking about this, I was thinking, I've done research on professional development for teachers, but what's my own experience? And my own experience was that I really learned a lot from experienced teachers around me. The network of teachers that I had was really important. I took lots of opportunities to support others when I could, and I learned a lot from that. I got involved in action research projects. I developed and shared resources. I used the Computing at School community. So I think that the angle of my research does actually reflect my own experience. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the research, but I thought I'd started off by thinking about my own experience in professional development. So for the rest of this talk, I'm now going to go through some of the research that's been done in this area, and then look at it more generally, and then focus in on computer science, and then focus in on some initiatives, and then give you some difficult questions to think about. So if we think about professional development in education, it's a huge field. There's lots of research in it. It's been going on since the 1990s. And then because there's been so much research in it, there's lots of meta studies, lots of studies that have been carried out where researchers have looked at sets of studies and drawn out the main findings across all of the studies. And there's been lots of those as well. And the themes that emerge are really quite similar. And the themes that emerge basically are around teacher professional development should be sustained, collaborative, and relevant to your learners' outcomes. And actually, I could just stop my talk there, because actually that kind of says it all. This is how, if we think about teacher professional development and think about all the studies that have been done, these are some of the really key themes that come across that we should embed in our teacher professional development initiatives. So, and I can show you some extracts going through history, so to speak. We call the 90s history now. So here's one. This is a table from a meta study by Stein and Smith and Silver. You've got the traditional approach on the left, and here's this sort of more new model 1999 on the right. So we're interested in more duration rather than short duration, scaffolding learning, using classrooms to support CPD. Sorry, I use the word CPD, I slipped out, but that's what we call it in the UK, continuous professional development. And so this idea of being more focused on pedagogy, more focused on in the school was developing in the 90s. And then we've got another meta review, and this is just the end of a very long table by Borko and her colleagues. And here we've got some of the themes coming out again from several studies that she reviewed. Professional development should be sustained, ongoing and intensive, should have follow-up, support. There should be opportunities to learn over time, should be school-based, based on outcomes. Then if we skip forward again, 2013, this was a large study carried out in the UK, and these 5 themes appear. So you can just see this similarity across as the field developed. Staff should work together in their professional development. They should be supported by specialist expertise, and they should be focused on the aspirations of their students. And professional developments are not one-off, they're long interventions that sustain over years. And teachers should be able to explore the evidence themselves by trying new things. And this has been very much my experience in my professional development activities. And then we come over to the US in 2017, another large study done by Linda Darling-Hammond and her colleagues. She's published loads in this area. And here you've got some similar themes, but adding to it content focused, but incorporate active learning with coaching and expert support, offering feedback and reflection, and then the other models about being collaborative and being sustained. So we've got this very clear message coming through around how we think that professional development should be. And I've taken this, this next slide, I've taken just a screenshot of a page of another similar report, because I quite like these 2 quotes. So in order to produce lasting change, professional development lasts at least 2 terms, 2 semesters, more usually a year. Here's another one. A didactic model doesn't lead to positive outcomes for participants or students. So you can just, at the risk of repeating myself dozens of times, hear the messages that are coming through about the ways that we should really be working with teachers. And then I'm going to look at what we're doing in computer science education research. And there have been some meta-studies just around computer science, and I've pulled out 2 here. One's by Liu et al. In 2011, and one's by Menexay in 2015. And the kind of practice that they're highlighting in those days was around, we were delivering in computer science maybe quite short PD programs, and maybe I think the inference about being delivered by CS faculty members was that the deliverers didn't have much experience of school. And then Menexay and her study looked at 6 features of effective CPD, which I can see at the bottom of my slide, which are, as we've seen, long and explicit on active learning methods, etc., PCK, the sort of things that are emerging from the literature. And she only found 1 study out of those. It was the Georgia Computes professional development thing that actually includes all those 6 features. So I think, there's some of our practice in CS that's not aligning to the generic research. But there is some other really excellent and interesting practice. So there's examples here of work on professional learning communities for CS teachers. So Jean Ryu and Joanna Good talking about the work on the Exploring CS projects. Communities of practice, that's in UK, through Computing at School, and professional learning networks from Scotland. So examples of being collaborative. So, and also the disciplinary commons approach, it's similar, but the reason I picked that out separately is because of this sustained element. coming back and having monthly meetings. And I think there's good examples of that from some of the studies that we have published now. And then there's a few things on action research in computing. Two of the examples there are from Israel, and one's from my own study. That's where teachers try out interventions in the classroom, and then they something that really is important to them, is interests them, and they learn a lot about teaching the subject through those studies. So before I get on to, let me just go back a bit. So what I want to do next is to move on to some specific examples of professional development that I've been very familiar with. But I wanted just to say, I've given you my teaching story. I got involved in professional development as soon as I got into teacher education. So 2011, started a program called Python School, and running professional development sessions for teachers, etc., and was involved in the curriculum changes in England. But my one takeaway from that is it takes a long time. So some of the teachers that I started training in 2012 that were coming to sessions that I was running in England, and now they're just amazing. They're like leading huge regional hubs. They're like absolutely, superstars in pedagogy, and it's amazing. But there's a long journey from 2012 or 2013 to 2020, and it does take some time. And this idea that we can just throw some money in, teach teachers how to teach computing, and then withdraw, I think is a fallacy. So I just wanted to talk through some of the things I've been involved in, for better or for worse. So, and in the context of these, is that in England, we started to think about moving over from ICT into computing as a mandatory subject in the national curriculum between 2010 and 2014, when the curriculum was launched. So this is where these initiatives have come from, through a need to train teachers who are in situ, who are actually already teaching, and suddenly were ICT teachers, they were labelled as a teacher of something, and they suddenly get a new label of something else. So there was an urgency about a lot of training of teachers in England. In Scotland, the situation is slightly different, because Scotland's always had computing science in the curriculum, so the teachers there tend to have good subject knowledge. And we'll talk about their programme in a moment. So if I start back in the Master Teachers and Network of Excellence programme, 2013 to 2018, this approach was built on a kind of a peer-to-peer approach. We had regional centres based in universities, but those centres really, the people on the ground were called master teachers. It's not a very good gender neutral term. I apologise on behalf of England for choosing such a naff term, but they were called master teachers, and they were teachers that helped other teachers. It was a peer-to-peer model of experienced teachers supporting others in their schools. Other aspects of that model were CAS, computing at school hubs, little meetings after school, communities of practice of teachers supporting each other, getting experts in, teachers driving the agenda. So it was a peer-to-peer sort of model. It was funded by the government, but not very much. And it was empowering for those teachers who gained a lot of expertise through this approach, and now they are, doing amazing things. The government stopped funding that in 2018, and I'll talk about why they did that in a moment. Moving on to the Scottish project. So in Scotland, they have teachers who've got good subject knowledge, but they weren't very confident in teaching. And there was a very rigorous program to engage teachers in pedagogy. They developed it was a fantastic project. Unfortunately, it didn't last longer than the funding, but they developed a network of teachers They engaged them in literature. They'd be sitting talking about worked examples and the block model and, you know, really into the nitty gritty of the best ways of teaching programming. And they had this expectation that, you know, there was some meeting and then there was going away and trying it, this kind of the Cording-Lie approach of exploring, trying new things. So that was great, led by Quintin Cutts in Glasgow. And this was a small scale project teaching, inquiry and computing education, which was of giving this broader view of professional development, that action research, as it's been found in the literature, is a key part of professional development. Trying new things out in your classroom really helps you to understand the teaching and learning and improve your own teaching and learning. And it helps you to understand your own subject better. So teachers came with their own projects. Academics volunteered their time to come in and support them with the research elements, and some sort of hand holding, and to make so it wasn't so time consuming. And we used, when we wrote this up, we used the model of Clark and Hollingsworth's teacher professional growth to show that this was really having an impact on teachers' working lives and practice. Of course, it was very, very small scale, and we're now trying to replicate it through online learning. And then the project I'm involved in at the moment is called the National Centre for Computing Education. What makes this interesting, if you've got to see that, what make greater funding, we had 80 million over 4 years, which is unheard of in England, but from the government to fund this project. So it's a very multifaceted approach and covers lots of bases, and it's more funding than we ever had. Like, you know, we only have like £1 million before for anything. There's lots of aspects to it, as you can see here. It's a school-led model, so the regional centres are not now in universities, they're based in schools. But the schools have a remit to train up teachers in their area using face-to-face or remotely delivered courses. But where teachers can't manage that, there's lots of other offers. So there are online courses. I'm going to show you some extracts from that in a moment. There are these communities, these computing at school communities. We've got a real, we're doing lots of work on pedagogy. We're kind of trying to whittle down the research into like 2-page summaries so that teachers can understand you know, what the research says and apply it in classroom. And we've got podcasts and pedagogy meetings, etc. Got certification available, and we've written a whole curriculum to support teachers' workload. So lots of things going on there. It's a big project. I thought it might be interesting just to highlight some of the online courses that we have, because these are available to you. Or, you know, they're completely freely available, and there's lots of courses there. We've got about 30 3-week future courses on the Future Learn platform now. So I just thought I'd break up the monotony of me talking by just playing a little extract, if I can get it to play. So here's one little extract of an online course. This is about understanding computing systems, and it's for secondary teachers.
Most of the input devices we've discussed so far, the keyboard, the mouse, the microphone, are human controlled. The original input, the information, is coming from you. Another type of input device is a sensor. Let's take a look at some of the examples of sensors we use every day here at the Raspberry Pi Foundation. Automatic doors, keycard panels, motion sensors for the alarms, PIR lights, smoke detectors, even the milk level in the coffee machine. A great classroom activity is to ask students to design their smart home of the future. Ask them to label inputs, sensors, outputs, and describe how they would interact through automation. Get them to think about the advantages of automation in their smart home, and discuss any disadvantages they can think of too. Share your thoughts on any potential classroom activities in the comments below.
So these courses, that was just an excuse to show you all the things that we have in Raspberry Pi Foundation. But these courses are teachers join at once, and then they can upload examples of what they're doing and share comments. It's trying to generate a kind of community amongst the cohort of teachers taking them. Just thought I'd share another one about this. We have some courses on programming pedagogy, one for secondary, one for primary, to support teachers. I'll just show a little bit of this.
When creating a worked example, it's important to avoid the split.
This is about worked examples.
This can add additional processes to working memory that aren't necessary. The split attention effect is when an example is given to the learners and the description appears separately, giving the learner the extra job of combining the information together. Let's look at an example of how we can break the problem of creating a guess the number game into manageable chunks. I've broken this down into two clear sets. So we're going to hold the value of secret and guess first of all.
In the interest of time, I'll stop there because you don't necessarily need to see her working through her little example. But that was just to give you an example of some of the things that are coming out of the National Centre. And then we've got, I think, underpinning all of this in UK is Computing at School. It's a network of teachers. It started in 2008, 2009, and will probably outlive other government-funded initiatives. And it's really based on teachers meeting with each other, developing their professional networks, and getting involved, sharing resources. There's an upload facility for sharing your resources and discussing with others. And you are all welcome to join Computing at School. I haven't put the maybe Jane can put the link on there on the chat. You're all welcome to join Computing at School. It's a great place to be. Okay, so to draw all this together, I'm hoping that if you came in thinking around professional development for teachers as being around basically summer camps, courses, seminars, etc., and maybe you didn't, that I do think, we need to think about professional development in a really broad way and think about it from a teacher's point of view, how teachers will feel empowered to feel that they're the driver behind their own professional development by taking part in communities, classroom research, peer observation, engaging with research, supporting others. And I think these are really important parts, and that they all, make up this, this big umbrella that actually makes up professional development. And my overall recommendations, drawing all this together, would be that sustained collaborative approaches, as I said right at the beginning, those are the things that the research says lead to effective professional development. We should be thinking about how our professional development aligns to real learning outcomes in the classroom, what your students are going to achieve. And I can't emphasize enough how important I think it is as a teacher and a next teacher, the communities that we have with other teachers. And this little quote is a teacher explaining how they help other teachers with subject knowledge. They give the people confidence to go away. But that teacher, by doing that, that is their professional development as well. They are learning by doing that and sharing with others. They're learning from their communications. So I'm coming to the end of my talk, but I made sure I didn't fill the whole time allocated so that we had time to do a breakout and to have some discussions in the amongst you. Well, one of the things I want to think about is the challenges and the I want you to come back to me really with what you think the challenges are and what might be problematic about some of the suggestions that I've made about how we should run teacher professional development. As an example, I've got a challenge there. Bottom-up approach to professional development is great, but it's slow. The reason the government stopped funding the project we had in 2018 was because we couldn't scale it. We couldn't scale it fast enough to reach everybody in the country, and we needed to. The top-down approach, a government fund says all do this, and nobody wants to do it because they've been told to do it. So where does bottom-up meet top-down? There's an issue for you to think about. There's the whole issue about it's all very well for Sue to sit there and say we've got to have long PD programs. How can we possibly get teachers to spend that amount of time on PD because they're so busy and they're so stressed and they're so overworked, and there are lots of issues there. So I've got for the discussion section, can you think about in some breakout groups this bottom up, top down issue, if you can kind of understand what I mean, grassroots versus, we tell them what to do. The sort of teacher to teacher learning versus the expert. You're sort of dipping in a bit of this, a bit of that versus this is your certification. The something our government gets exercised about, the knowledge rich thing, should we all just be delivering content versus, let's align this to practice. What's the best pedagogy? The whole sustained short-term thing, and then where do you do it? Do you do it in your school? Do you travel? Do you learn online? And there's lots of things that we can think about there. Now I've put a link there to, it's the longest link you've ever seen on the bottom line there. So I don't expect you to memorize that. So could I try and put that in the chat? There you go. Benji's put that in the chat. So just before you go into breakout groups, I think which is just for about 6 minutes or so, you take a copy of that link, and I'll see you back here for questions. Thank you very much. Well, welcome back, everybody. I see you had some fun with the Padlet, adding some things on there. It was a bit longer. We haven't got much time now, do we, Benji, for questions?
Yeah, we only have about a few more minutes, but if anyone wants to raise their hand or drop a question in the chat, we can ask Dr. Sentance a few closing questions. Alternatively, Dr. Sentance, I'm not sure if you want to look at all the scribbles on the Padlet and comment and give us your thoughts on what you see there.
Yes, anybody want to pick out a comment that they wrote on the Padlet in particular and highlight it? There's a lot down there.
Renee does have a question. Renee follows a question in the chat. Based on your vast experience and research, what would you say are areas where future research on CSPD are most needed?
What I think we're missing is longitudinal outcomes. I think where I think we need to work more on is, what impact are we actually having on teachers' knowledge and confidence over a long period of time, and how does that impact on students? And I'd like to see more longitudinal studies. It's obviously it's difficult. Teachers move school and that sort of thing, and to see what what the impact is on student learning, because we invest a lot in it. Yeah, that's
great. Yeah, I think that need for longitudinal outcomes is very necessary. So I think with that, we are at time, so we'll have to